All right, you know what time it is. You seen him up here with me about a week ago. Shout out to the homie Dom, usually behind the scenes, but has been stepping it up of lately, man. And every time I look up, every time I pop up on the phone, I'm like, yo, we got a new person that's linked to the team, a new person with interest. They're talking about how we have all this cap space, right? 60
hmm
plus million with the chance to balloon it to 80. And the quarterback, of course, that has popped up of lately with mutual emphasis on mutual, not just one side, mutual interest is Daniel Jones,
Mm.
aka Danny Dimes. Talk to me, Dom. How we feeling about Danny Dimes and this mutual
Man,
interest that's being reported? I mean, are we really there? We there now?
it's such an interesting name. I mean, you hear guys like Aaron Rodgers, that gets you excited. Matt
It's A
Stafford,
Ron.
that might get you pumped up. You got guys who've won Super Bowls, but Daniel Jones, it's not one of those that really pops off the page. But in
Yeah.
my opinion, I think this makes perfect sense for the Steelers. I know.
Oh,
And here's
okay.
why. Here's
Okay.
why. I think
Yeah.
that the Giants, we all know it's a poor organization.
They're like
They can't
Cleveland,
get it
just in New
done.
York. Yeah.
Exactly. The Steelers, on the other hand, it's one of the best organizations in football. You know what you're getting here. So with quarterback, it's always a two-way street. And I
Mhm.
think that the Steelers know that maybe this guy didn't get the best shake. He didn't get the right
Wow.
supporting cast. He didn't
Yeah,
have dynamic receivers. He didn't have great coaches.
it's
Steelers,
true.
I think, we're working in that direction. I think it's better than what the Giants have. But
Yeah.
here's the big thing where, I was down and out on Daniel Jones for the longest time, but then I
Oh.
started thinking about what the Steelers do and the type of guys that Mike Tomlin wants. And I thought about Dwayne Haskins. That was a guy who was a
Ooh,
first round pick,
very true.
you know, probably wasn't a guy who people expected to be drafted in the first round that high. Same thing with
Okay.
Daniel Jones. People were
Okay.
furious when they took him.
Out
And
of Duke,
obviously, things
absolutely.
didn't
Yeah.
pan out with Dwayne Haskins in Washington, but the
Mm-hmm.
Steelers ended up giving him another shot. And I think, obviously we didn't have
The
the full
optimism
time.
was crazy high over here behind him too, man.
Exactly. And there are guys like, Mike Tomlin would love a guy like Chase Young, guy who
Oh,
maybe
of course.
another
Yeah.
Washington guy,
Mm-hmm.
first round pick who didn't give the best opportunity, but
Yeah.
now he knows that he can give these guys these shots.
Yeah.
And I think, especially like you mentioned with the cap space, this is one of those guys where we don't have to spend a ton of money like a Russell
Mm-hmm.
Wilson, an Aaron Rodgers, or a Matt Stafford. So
Yeah.
is it my number one pick for the Steelers quarterback? Definitely not. But I could see it making a lot of sense.
Dom, I was not expecting you to come up here and cook like this today. Yo, you brought up
Listen,
Dwayne Haskins, the former first round of the expectations. Obviously, RIP to him, but he didn't necessarily fulfill those expectations in Washington. And that was why we took the low risk, high reward type signing, which in theory is what you would be doing with Daniel Jones. Whoa, I was not expecting that, Dom. I
mm-hmm.
was not expecting that one. Okay,
And
okay.
I got another one, which
All
might
right, talk
be
to me.
it
Talk to
might be
me.
even further of a stretch here, but stick with me here.
Okay, okay.
Let's think about Drew Brees and how his career started
All right,
with
I'm
the
following you.
Chargers. It
Mm-hmm.
was very shaky at first. I think in his
Yeah.
second or third year, he had more interceptions than touchdowns thrown.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when he moved over to New Orleans, they started
Sean
picking things
Payton,
up.
yeah.
The consistency was there. He started protecting the football,
Mm-hmm.
and efficiency was the name of his game. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, that's a bit of a stretch because Drew Brees is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but it
Uh-huh.
shows that if you have a rough start to your career with a team
Yeah.
that might not be in the best situation, things can always pan out in a much better way with a more successful, better ran
No,
organization.
without a doubt. And I mean, I would even take it a step further, right? You brought up the Hall of Famer Drew Brees, and we love, anytime you get a chance to just see something that would just look in the framework of Hall of Fame. But I would also just say, what about how Geno Smith? I mean, we saw literally New York Jets situation. He doesn't have the success there. He gets to Seattle, change the scenery, more stability around him organizationally, and the dude has thrived out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so we can point to multiple examples. I mean, Sam Darnold's obviously the poster boy this year because what he was able to do in Minnesota. And when you look at Daniel Jones, I mean, he does have a more recent playoff victory than the Steelers. And I think that that's also something that we have to factor in. He has found a way to get it done. Now, we know the consistency hasn't always been there, but you do see some things with Daniel Jones that, from an intangible standpoint, can he run? We would all say, yeah, he could run. We would put him
Mm-hmm.
more in more of the upper echelon of athletic quarterbacks. Does he have a big arm and he could throw the ball down the grass? Yes, we would say he has a really good arm from just a arm strength and talent standpoint. Now, everything else after that, when we say, okay, does he have prototypical size? We're gonna say yes, he looks the part as well. Now,
Mm-hmm.
with all of those things, it goes back to what you were bringing up in terms of does the change of scenery really promote that? And I think that's the personal belief part. Now, do you have more belief that he in this situation in Pittsburgh could develop into that quarterback that puts all of these different traits together and we see it consistently? Or do you think that we're better off with Justin Fields and you think that he gives us a higher probability of tapping into that?
Yeah, I think it's a similar situation here. I think if you can't bring both of them in, I don't think that
Oh,
makes a lot of
okay.
sense because I think you're
Okay.
working with the same thing here. They're both
Yeah.
guys who are seemingly on an upward trend in their careers, but
Hmm.
haven't reached that peak yet. So
Yeah.
I think taking both of them is a bit more of a risk than I'd be willing to take. But I think
Okay.
it's definitely similar, but I would lean Justin Fields here just because I think he's more of a dual threat than Daniel Jones.
No, and I would agree. Justin Fields for certain more of the dual threat. I looked at just from the competition standpoint. I'm like, well, even though they are very similar, due to the fact that both of these guys are young and still trying to get their NFL, foundation solidified, why not let them compete to see, like, hey man, of these dual threat guys, one we say is more apt with his legs, the other guy we would say is a little bit more apt with his arm. Well, let's see which of these, you know, two styles can ultimately become the guy that we feel is ready to lead this team. Because with either one, because of how cheap they would be, you could still add pieces around him. And I think that's the other critical part to this thing, right?
Yeah, but then I think the flip side is if these guys are willing to compete, we don't want another Kenny Pickett situation where we're scrambling in the
True,
summer.
true. This is
So I
very
think if you
true.
know that both these guys are committed and willing to compete for this role, I'm all for that. I think it does
Okay.
definitely bring out the best in all these guys. So it would be interesting. I'd definitely be for that.
Now, respect on that then, because I mean, even when we think about what you brought up about if they're open to competing or not, we do know when it was Russ. Russ was always from the beginning of it open to the competition. Kenny, we obviously heard, was not fond of it. Justin Fields was open to it, but it seemed like the communication still came off more of it's Russ's show and Fields, you're just the number two, regardless of what you do. And that's why Fields, I think in the report that came out from Jeremy Fowler, he said that he's open to coming back to the Steelers, but he needs some type of guarantee, some type of promise that he is going to get a legitimate chance to be the starting quarterback. So I get that part, and that does make me feel a little bit concerned about his overall level of being open to competition. Um,
Hmm.
but I could also understand where he's coming from when everything that happened last year. You play the 6 games, you play well, some of his best ball, and you get pulled for Russ. And when it goes bad at the end down the 5 game stretch, we never turn back to him. That could leave
Yeah.
you feeling a little bit, a little bit skittish on the trust part of it, right?
Yeah. And he's still a young guy, but
Mm-hmm.
he's well into his career at this point. He's going to be
Yeah,
a veteran basically. So he doesn't want to have to be competing for being the number one guy. But I think with
yeah,
Daniel Jones, it's a lot easier for him to go out there and be like, "Oh yeah, I got this easily. I've
yeah.
been with this team. I've won with this team." Compared to
Mm-hmm.
going up against a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who has a decade plus of experience, tons
Yeah,
of money committed to him. It's just
it's just
it's
loud,
it's not a
man. It's a
fair
lot of
it's not a fair
energy. The
battle.
fans, the fans are gonna be over here like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's his job. He's got this. He won this already. It's him. Yeah.
exactly. Where I feel like if it was Daniel Jones, he's got the support of the fans, he's got the experience with the coaching staff and the front office. I think he'd have a much better and,
Yeah.
and fair shot against Daniel Jones than a veteran with a
Okay.
lot of money committed to him.
No, I like that right there. Like I said, I'm surprised, man. You might be the first person that I've heard, at least on the microphone, talk about being open to Daniel Jones, man. I'm like,
He
hey
has
now.
moments. He has
All right.
moments. He
He
was a first round pick
does.
for a reason.
He does. It's the weirdest thing. Like, he does do a lot of the things that you would want in the guy. And that's
Yeah.
why he was took where they took him at in the first round. And that's why even he got the money committed to him, picking up the franchise tag and then signing the long-term deal.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency has been his Achilles heel, though.
Yeah.
But he has everything that you, if he was coming out in this draft right now, you're going to look and say, he has every single thing that you want in any of, the quarterback prospects. So you're not off, man. I could definitely see what you're on, man. For certain, I can see what you are on.